Alright, now we're looking at foliage painting, and that is painting our crops and like fruit crops like wheat and barley to our grass, like our meadow grass that we can mow, or our decorative stuff like bushes and short grass and rocks. And what it does is just creates another layer on top of your texture layers that is separate. And you just can pick through your foliage layers here to select what you want to put down. In our brush editing or our brush options here, everything is pretty much the same. The only thing you're going to be using in this mode is just the radius commands to change the size of your brush. These really don't do anything in this mode. Really, you're going to be only using the add command as well. So if we start looking at our painting tools, the stuff we're going to be looking at in our foliage mode is going to be our foliage layer and our channels. And our foliage layer dictates what we're painting. All the fruit crops are kind of interchangeable, but it's always good to have the one that you're trying to paint selected because it gives you the base channels, and I'll explain that a little bit later. Down here we've got some detail stuff like short grass, stones, bushes, and normal grass, and those are our little detail texture or detail foliage that you see on maps that like grass and bushes that you can't mow or can't do anything with, but makes a map look pretty. At the very bottom we have our terrain detail layer, and that's a really important one. That one is our field textures, like plowed or cultivated field textures. And so we'll look at those first, and we'll also make a couple fields just to demonstrate how they work. Our terrain detail texture is also what defines your field and defines what your helper, your helper worker is going to consider a field. So if we're going to set our field boundaries here, oh, I just painted some. We can just start with that blob, and we'll just make a little blob field here, and you'll see that I have channel 1 selected, and channel 1 is just like a basic cultivated texture. And if we switch just to channel 2, turn off channel 1, paint some, you'll see we get a nice plowed texture. And we turn off channel 2 and go to channel 3, and we paint, we see we get a nice seeded, this is our like post seed drill texture. And there's a bunch of short grass texture over here that I didn't take out. So we've got 3 different types for 3 different channels. Our 4th channel is our fertilized channel, and that channel needs to be used in conjunction with one of the other 3, or else it'll glitch out. Your Giants editor has a fit when you just use it by itself. So like if we wanted a seeded and fertilized field texture, we select 3 and 4, and we could paint a nice seeded and fertilized texture. And the same goes for your plowed and cultivated textures as well. So that's how you paint your fields. Now we'll look at the rest of the texture, the rest of the detail foliage, like our normal grass, bushes, and stones, and that sort of thing. And what we're going to do is just grab one of these. Oops, wrong menu. Let's see, bushes, and we can actually with this tool change, with this menu selection, change our radius down all the way to 1. We'll zoom in a little bit, and we have bushes selected on our foliage layer and channel 1. You notice there's only one channel available for this, and that means it's either on or off. And so you can paint some bushes, or you can turn it off and you can delete the bushes. And the same goes for these texture layers. You can go into your detail texture layer here and turn off the channels all the way, and you can delete your terrain detail textures. The same works for the bushes, stones, and short grass. They all have one channel, and it's just on or off. The fruit textures, like wheat and grass and barley and rape, and our maize textures, are all a little trickier because they have multiple channels for all of their multiple growth states. Now, I'll explain those to you really briefly because there's a lot of variation to them and it gets real confusing. If you need all the channel options for the fruit textures, they're in William 7530's All You Need to Know About Maps tutorial that I mentioned earlier. He breaks down all of the different channels you need to have active for your fruit fruit foliage to display correctly and be in the correct growth state. So I'll just go over them real quickly. Like if we want to place wheat, you'll see it pops up with channel 1, and that's our default wheat channel. If we want to place barley, we'd have to, where's our barley? We'd have to have our third channel selected and then our different other channels for different growth states. And if we wanted to do maize or corn, it's 1 and 3 needs to be selected. And our OSR or our rapeseed stuff is going to be 1 and 2. And with the different texture or with the different foliage, we need to select different channels to make them into different growth states, excuse me. And I haven't had these memorized. I've got a cheat sheet, and a pretty standard thing is if you want full-grown crops, you can pretty much always select channels 5 and 7, and you get a fully grown crop of whatever you have selected. But keep in mind that just because you have wheat selected up here doesn't mean you're always painting wheat. If you have the incorrect channels selected, like if I have 1 and 3, even though I'm still on the foliage layer of wheat, I can actually paint corn. So just keep in mind what you're painting and what layer you're in, because it can get pretty confusing after a while. So if we can turn off all our layers and we can delete all of our foliage layers. And you'll notice that doesn't delete our terrain detail layer. We'd have to go to our terrain detail to delete that. So you can, safely paint and delete on top of your different layers. So that's how you add crops. You can also add your grass the same way. The grass is channel 2, so if we do 2, 5, and 7, we get full-grown mowable grass. If we turn off all of them, they go away. And then if we turn off, if we turn on 2 and turn on 8, oop, that's the wrong one. There's an option in here somewhere that gives you, mowed grass. So you can do all kinds of different things once you know the channels. And like I said, the channels are all listed in William 7530, his really good All You Need to Know About Maps tutorial that is in the LSUK forums. That pretty much covers the basics of terrain painting, or foliage painting. You can play around with the channels and play around with the different settings, and you kind of get used to it after a while. I've got all this extra grass that's bothering me here, so this is our normal grass, so we can actually go in here and delete that. We'll select normal grass, turn off the channel, and we can delete some of this grass. Oh, and it looks like there's some short grass in there too, so you can do the same with short grass. Short grass, turn off the channel, and then you can delete it. So that's pretty much how you do your foliage painting. And hopefully that explains a couple things, because I've seen a lot of questions on the forums about how do I add crops, or how do I add grass, or how does the, how do you set the fields and that kind of thing. And that pretty much breaks that down. Alright, so that pretty much covers the basics of using Giant's editor. There's a couple more things I want to go over real quick. I want to remind everybody that when you're editing your folder or your map, make sure you have a backup and save often in the editor, and then back up your file often, and make your backup a couple saves before your latest save, because there's been times when I've done weird things in the editor and it's killed my entire map and I haven't had a backup, and I lost like 3 days of work, and it's just no fun. So always have a backup. I want to go over the scene graph just a little bit more because it's kind of an important piece of equipment. If we close this, we have our scene graph over here. Basically what our scene graph does is breaks down all the objects that we have imported in our map at any given time, and you'll notice that there's all kinds of different icons and stuff. Usually the little purple box means that it's an object, and our little thing here next to our career start point with the three little shapes, that's a transform group, and stuff can be placed in transform groups to be grouped together and moved together as one big object. Because if you select multiple objects just with a shift and mouse click, and then try and move them, you'll only move the active object. So let me import another, let's just do another implement shed here. So I'll place this implement shed by our other one, and now we have two, and if I multiple select them, you'll see one's white and one's green, and the green is always your active object, and unless you have these in the same group, which they're not right now, it'll only move your active object. So if we wanted to move these together, we would have to make a control group, and to do that, we can go to create and control group, or transform group, I'm sorry, calling it a control group, it's a transform group. So now we have an empty transform group right here, and we can actually take these two sheds and copy them with Control C, or cut them with Control X, and they cut, and then select our transform group and hit Control V to paste, and now they're pasted inside our transform group. And you'll notice that you can drop them down. They're now childs of this transform group, and it's pretty helpful when you want to have things in groups together for easy selection or easy finding of them in the scene graph. And you can rename your transform group over here in the attributes menu to whatever. So it's a good way to organize your objects. The one problem that does present though is sometimes when you have a transform group, so we've got some funkiness going here. When you have a control group, your gizmo for moving moves back to the origin because it can't decide which object to use as its object, so it just moves back to the origin, which makes things kind of difficult when you want to move them around because you have to account for where they are in relation to the origin. So that's kind of funky, but it's really nice if you've got your stuff where you want it and you need to organize your scene graph because everything's chaos when you have 1,000 objects in here, and you can put them in separate control groups, or transform groups, excuse me. And there's also other advantages when it comes to scripting and doing other sorts of specific actions with your objects when they need to be in a transform group together. So I just wanted to explain that real quick because it's kind of an important aspect of your Giants editor. And just trying to think if I missed anything else, but I can't think of anything. So hopefully this tutorial really helped you out and just grasp the basics of Giants editor and how to get some stuff done in there, and it'll set you on your way to making some really cool maps, and I look forward to seeing what you guys have to offer. Alright, well, thanks for watching, you guys, and maybe I'll make another tutorial coming up soon. Take care.